Hello everybody. In this video, we are going to be building and deploying a NextJS chat application powered by NextJS, Chat Engine, and Vercel. To show you what we're going to be building, let's walk through it right now. It starts with a login page where you can log in or sign up with this form. Once you've logged in or signed up, it retrieves your chat history if present. And then the chat page is very advanced. It supports group chats as well as direct messages, real-time chat support, image and file support, read receipts for messages, as well as online and offline statuses, photo history, and so much more. And as a bonus, I threw in a suite of CSS files that creates this midnight theme, and as a matter of fact, this theme went pretty viral on Reddit, as you can see here. So shout out to the creator, Matt765 on GitHub. And without wasting any more time, let's hop right into building this project. To start, let's go to the repository for the boilerplate project, which we will be building code on top of. To do that, go to the first link in the description of this video, and you'll get brought to this page here. To download the code, super easy. Go to code, download zip, put it wherever you want. In this case, I'll do desktop, save. The zip file appears. Once it fully downloads, there it is. Expand, you get the directory, drag that into VS Code, and the code base is right here. So before we start writing Next.js, let's make sure that we're familiar with the current files in the project before we start doing so. You can see that we have three main folders: pages, public, and styles. Let's start with pages. We have the chats page and the index page, which will be used for chats and authentication respectively. And then we have this special app.js file. It basically represents any code that you want to share across all the pages within your application. So in this case, we will be very shortly adding some React context so that various pages can share the same state data. A pretty advanced concept on paper. It's actually really simple, and we'll explain it very easily in this video. So those are the pages. Public, very simple stuff for when you deploy, things like metadata for SEO, as well as icons and assets. And then last but not least, styles, the bonus CSS files, which I will be providing you so that you can make a very pretty chat application right off the bat. And we'll be using a lot of the classes and IDs within here throughout the video. So now we're basically familiar with everything that goes into this project. Let's start writing code on top of it to make sure that we can build out a very nice chat experience. The first thing we are going to be building is actually the React Context API. Both the chat page and the authentication page need access to the same user state data. So we're going to write it in one place within the context so that they can pull from it or set new values whenever they want. Sounds pretty confusing, so let's just build it, and it will become incredibly simple to understand when we start using it in the other pages. So to build out our context API, let's create a top-level folder and call it context. And inside that file or that folder, let's create an index.js file. Now, we're going to be building a context component and a context provider component, which sound a little confusing. So what I'm going to do is paste the code and walk through each line one at a time. This is the code here. Once you've written it out yourself or you've pulled from it by the link in the description, let's start walking through it. The first thing is that we need some stuff from React. So we need React, of course, as well as useState to create and update state variables, as well as the create context library. And then we export two components. The first one is the context component. This basically initializes an instance of a context API. Very buzzwordy, but it will become very simple later on. The second component is a provider. Now, a provider is a component that you can put components inside of, and whenever components live inside of the provider, they can have access to this context. That's a little bit easier to understand beforehand, but again, will be very simple when we build this out. And the state data, which we want to be able to share between applications, is the user's username and their secret. If a username and secret is present, then we know the user is logged in. And if there isn't a username or password, then we know the user is logged out. So that will be very helpful when determining which page to render. And then you have to pass in these values as a value prop into the provider. So now that we have copy and pasted / built out this page, let's do the last thing and uncomment these lines here. Now what we have is the entire application wrapped in this context provider, so no matter what page you are on, you are going to be able to easily access the current user's username and their secret, which will be very, very easy. And let's show you how to do this with the index.js page / authentication. Before we start building the authentication form, let's make sure that this project actually runs okay and see how it looks before we start doing so. So let's just pop open the terminal, and we're going to need to install all of the dependencies and then run the project. So just run yarn. That will automatically install everything. And once that's complete, let's run yarn dev. When that finishes, it should open up a website on port localhost 3000. And when we go to it, we can see how the project looks. If all of the copy and pasted context code works, it will look okay, which it doesn't. That's actually really easy. We just forgot to pass in props into the top level. So if we go back to context and actually pass in props like we should have, this should work now. That's what you get for copying and pasting code. Now you can see those two familiar pages, right? Authentication when you're first at the website. And I guess if we go to chats, we'll see that chats page. So let's go back to authentication and build out the web form right now. So to do this, let's hop over to the index file, the one that says auth in it, pages index, and let's start importing the necessary dependencies. The first thing is beyond React, we'll actually need to access that context state data, which we created earlier. So to do this, import use context. The next thing we're actually going to need to import is the context that we created. So you go import context with squiggly braces from double up context. Awesome. We need one or two more things. When we log in, we want to redirect to the chats page. So we need to import use router from NextJS /router, just next/router. And then the last thing that we need is Axios. And we'll actually need to install Axios separately. So in the terminal, do yarn add Axios. That's going to download that client. And then we can import Axios from Axios. No need for squiggly braces. And we might not necessarily use all of these imports right now. Let's just build out the JSX to see how this form will look once completed. So we actually want to keep the div with the background in it. That's that cool black background we were using earlier. Now let's import some more stuff. We want a div, and we're going to give it a class name auth container. And this is pulling from those CSS files that we brought in earlier on. The next thing is we actually want to create a form. This form will also have a class name. So class name should be something like auth-form. And then we have an onSubmit prop. When the form is submitted, we need to do something. So let's just do e.prevent default by start. This will just basically make it do absolutely nothing. Now, let's actually see how this looks. We got a nice little box right in the middle, but we need the title as well as the two inputs and that button right at the bottom. So let's start doing this. Title. Let's do div, add a class name. It's something like auth title, auth-title, and then call it whatever you want. I'll just write NextJS Chat. Perfect. Now let's start importing the inputs. So we'll actually do one more div. We'll give this a class name of input-container. And then we can start building out these inputs. So input, give it a closed tag actually. And then there are a few props we'll want to paste in for the first one. So placeholder, I'm going to set it equal to email. You could use username too. It's username or email, entirely up to you. And then I give it a class name of text-input. The last thing we want to do is onChange. This is where we will start using the context API. So onChange, this is a function which takes an event and then does something called set username to e.target.value. But hey, Adam, there's no set username. So let's actually import that through the context. If you remember earlier, we have the set username, and the beauty of this is when we set the username in the context, then the chats page will be able to pick up that username value later. So it's the best place to do it. Why don't we just import all of the context stuff right now? So const squiggly braces equals use context, and then let's just actually import all of these values. Awesome. So what we're doing is taking that context which we initialized at the beginning of the application and then using that to pull in all of the state data and functions. Let's see how this looks. Awesome. Cool. Looks great. Let's just do the exact same thing for password. So I'll just do a copy and paste. Placeholder is password. We actually want type is equal to password so we can hide the value. Keep text input, and then we'll do set secret to e.target.value. And I actually don't think we're going to need the secret or the username value. Great. Last but not least, we need to import that final button that we use to log in or sign up. So button login/sign up. Sign up. And then let's import a few props for this as well. So type equals submit, and then a class name equals to I think it's submit-button. Cool. Let's see how this looks. Awesome. That is the authentication form, right? So what we do is we type in our name or email and then a password. And when we click enter or log in and sign up, that prevent default does nothing. When we are changing these values, we are updating the username and the secret within the context. And last but not least, we are adding all of these class names because we have a ton of code, i.e. custom CSS code, that takes these values and assigns unique stuff to it. So we've written out the JSX for the authentication form, and we linked all the correct class names to the CSS files I provided. But now we actually need to take that username and secret and create a user or log them in as an existing user. And you're probably thinking, where are we going to log into? What auth mechanism are we going to use? Where is the server? Where are we going to host these users' chats and messages? Well, the answer to that today is Chat Engine. So Chat Engine is a suite of UI components as well as a hosted server for creating chat experiences. And we'll be using it today to create chat users and then link them to existing chat rooms. So let's go ahead and do this. The first thing we'll need to do is go to chatengine.io and then log in if you have an account or create one from scratch. Once that's created, we'll need to make a project. I'm going to call my NextJS-temp because I'll tear it down right after this video. Enter. It'll take a second for it to set everything up and then redirect us over. So just wait. There we go. And to actually create new users, we need to use the private key. So let's go ahead and look at this private key and just paste it into our project because we will need it later. So I'll just go up here and paste that in for now. The second thing is we'll actually need to find the API call that's used to get or create users. So there is one called the get or create user. It takes a username and a secret, and will either create a new user or find an existing user if one matches this criteria in the database. So we need to make a put request to this route. So let's start building this out. The first thing we want to do is make an onSubmit function. So function onSubmit. And the first thing we'll want to do is take that event when a submission has been created and do that prevent default, just to make sure that it doesn't auto refresh the page or anything. The second thing we'll want to do is validate the inputs. So make sure that the username and the secret values are correct. So now that I think about it, we'll definitely need the username and the secret from the context then. So let's pull them in from context. So to validate the inputs, let's make sure that if the username dot length is equal to 1 or 0 actually, or the secret dot length is equal to 0, then we know that they haven't put in anything. So let's just do return, basically doing nothing. If they have put in a username and a password, let's make that call. So axios.put, and here we'll paste in that route, which I copied earlier. And then we'll need this private key as well. The first thing we need to do is put in the data. So username colon username and secret colon secret. You can actually just compress this by doing the following because the value is the same. And then last but not least, we need to set those headers. So headers for authentication, new object, private dash key, and then paste that private key. And then once this API has been made and a response comes back and it's successful, we need to push to the chats page. So we'll do router.push and do chats. Now this router hasn't been defined. We need to do use router to do that. So const router equals use router in brackets. It looks like we had to delete a few things here. Try to guess for us. The last thing we need to do is replace this prevent default with onSubmit, pass in the event. And we just wrote a ton of code. So why don't we take a step back, see what we did, and then see if it works. So we pulled in the username and secret. So when this function gets called, we check to see if the values are legitimate to us. And if they are legitimate to us, we call this get or create user command or API with the private key that we got from our project in Chat Engine. Once that goes through, then we know that this username and secret are valid, and we go to the chats page and we start loading their chats. So let's see how this works. Refresh just in case. Adam@mail.com, pass 1234 for a new user. Boom, we're at chats. So we've just created a user. We should be able to see it in the database if we refresh. Perfect. And now let's start setting up Chat Engine components so they can create chat rooms and send messages back and forth to one another. Now, the last thing we need to write out is the chat page for when the user logs in. So let's go into that chat page and start writing the remaining code. The first thing I'm going to do is another suite of imports. I will paste these imports in and explain them once again line by line. The first thing are all the React libraries we need. So of course React, as well as state variables, use effect, which is basically lifecycle triggers, and then use context to of course pull in that username and password for linking the user to their chat instance. Context for context again, username and secret. And then we have these two things here. So use router to route back to the auth page if a user logs out. And then this is where it gets interesting. Dynamic for dynamic importing. So React Chat Engine, the UI components, actually use something called Quill. Quill is maintained by Salesforce and basically doesn't natively support Next.js. So we need to do dynamic importings so that we don't break the website. And we'll have to use Chat Engine in a particular way, and I'll explain exactly how in the next section of code. So let's start writing out the JSX and the React code that we need to build this out. The first thing we need is to pull in that username and secret. So const username and secret equals use context from the context which we defined. And then we also need the router and a variable which I'll explain after. So const router equals use router in brackets. And then we're going to need to create a state variable to determine whether or not we're ready to show the chat. And I'll explain why in a second. So const show chat set show chat is equal to use state false by default. So there's one check that we have to do before we can decide to actually render the chat components, which we will be using. So to do that, we're going to do use effect and check if the document variable is present. NextJS runs in the same project, both on the client side and the server side. So if you just try to call document without checking if it exists, you're going to break the website. And that's what Quill within React Chat Engine uses. So we just need to make sure that the document is present before we show the chat. So if type of document is not equal to null, set show chat to true. Great. And then down here, if show chat is false, just return an empty div. Great. And then let's actually render this chat component. So braces, because we'll be bringing in quite a few components. And then the first thing is we'll actually bring in a div with the class name of shadow, just for cool CSS effects. And then let's bring in chat engine. First thing we'll do is set the height to calc 100 VH minus 200 pixels, and then project ID, leave that blank for now, user capital N name equals to username, which we'll pull in from the context, and the same for secret. Capital S and capital N. Let's go back to chat engine, get that project ID. Awesome. And let's see how this looks. Looks like we're getting an issue. Oh yeah, of course, we need to add React Chat Engine. So yarn add React Chat Engine. Cool. So let's see how this looks. So let's go back to the auth page to log in actually. It's giving us a hard time. Just restart it. Taking a minute. There we go. Perfect. So adam@mail.com, pass 1234. It's taking a second to load. That's what this little next icon means. This is what happens when you run in dev. Perfect. So we have a chat component, even though it looks a little bit weird. Oh, I know. VH, not CH. Perfect. We're in. This is awesome. So now what we want to do is just if the username or the secret goes blank, i.e. the user data is lost or logged out, we should go back to the auth page. So let's make that last thing right now. Use effect. This triggers whenever state data changes. So if, same check as before, username.length is equal to 0 or secret.length is equal to 0, do router.push, done. And let's see how this looks. Sweet. So when we refresh It brings us back to the login page to do adam@mail.com, pass 1234, bring us here, and then let's get started. So we can do hello. The last thing I actually want to do is change this form. This is more like Slack. I want to do render new message form. It's a function where we return basically message form social component, which is within their library. We do that. Now we get this cool kind of message form, which I like a lot more. Great. So we've written out all the chat, right? The people, the photos, all that stuff comes baked into the UI components that Chat Engine provides. Now let's deploy this to Vercel. Deploying a NextJS app to Vercel is actually incredibly easy. So I'll show you how to do it in case you can't figure it out yourselves. The first thing you got to do is just create a repo. I called mine NextJS temp on GitHub. Once you've created a repo, you need to take this code down here to actually publish your existing code base into this repo under this URL. So let's go ahead and do that. You just got to do git add dot git commit -m, whatever you want to type. I already committed and pushed everything, and then you basically paste that script. You paste it. Once you paste it, everything should go into main. If you click refresh, you got your project up and running right here under your first commit. Beautiful. Then when you go into vercel.com, you're going to be prompted to add a project. You click add project, and this is where you're going to be able to sync your GitHub repos. Now I've already added NextJS temp, and when you click import and just submit, you get a little website preview like that. We can click visit, and you can guess what this looks like. adam@mail.com, pass 1234. It's up, that chat history is back, and we can start sending hello, stuff like that, right? Hey, whatever we want to send. We're good. You got a fully working chat app. It's online. Hope you liked it. If you want to see things like email notifications, or you want to tie this into an existing app, or you want to see it integrated into something like a marketplace or React Native support, whatever you want, just let me know. I'm trying to keep this Chat Engine thing very conversational. So thanks for your time.